How's it, South Africans and people of the world? Welcome back to another episode of Jaxx of All Trades, the podcast where we speak about everything from politics to pop culture, skills, and people stories, because every joke is a goat in the making.
Please stop sending me that Amahle-Jaxx video. I urge you, please stop sending it to me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. So today's episode is how much therapy is too much therapy. And I was reading a comment on TikTok and somebody said, July boiled the water so August could cook. And I won't lie, I'm being boiled this month. I don't know about you guys, but I'm exhausted. Bad things are happening, not only in South Africa, but in this household, in this body, in this mind, right? So I thought, let's talk about therapy. Now, for a disclaimer, I'm obsessed with therapy. I'm obsessed with anything that has to do with improving my life, right? I'm in therapy. I work out 5 times a week. I journal. I meditate. What else is there? I quit alcohol. Heineken, if you're watching this, I'm your guy. But yeah, I have been on a health journey, I think, for the last 2-3 years, a mind, body, and soul kind of health journey. And as I was reflecting, especially this week, because once again, bad things are happening in South Africa, in this body, in this mind. I just thought to myself, I miss my therapist, number one. And I know she's trying to get rid of me. If you're watching this, I know we're having less and less sessions. You think I'm mentally sound. I'm not. I need your help. But yeah, I've been in therapy for about 5 years now. And essentially, it's 100%, helped improve my life. And I just want to state that I am pro-therapy. But the conversation we're having today is how much therapy is too much therapy, and has, this thing that's meant to help our minds and help us improve our lives, deal with our childhood trauma, has it been monetized to a point where it becomes a little bit dangerous, right? We've seen there's people on ChatGPT asking for advice. Don't do that. You need someone in front of you who can read your body language and, knows your full family history to kind of guide you in this world that we're living in that is quite destructive, might I add. So yeah, I'm struggling right now. I said, what's that meme? I said I don't have the capacity.
I said we don't have the capacity.
That's where I'm at. I'm booked, busy, and grateful. You see, the therapy is working because I can be grateful through it all. But yeah, so essentially what I wanted to speak about was, with the rise of therapy culture, have we taken it a little bit too far, right? Like I said, I'm an advocate for this. It's helped me in so many ways. So today I'm going to go a little bit personal. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey. And then I'm going to give, some things that I've read, some stories that I've seen about therapy. And then we're just going to chat today, guys. Like, but yeah, so the rise of therapy means that, we have therapy memes, we have therapy TikTok, we've got Instagram therapists with millions of followers. And the good part of this whole conversation is that it's kind of normalized seeking help and, people dealing with their childhood traumas and being better partners, being better friends, being better people at work. I mean, I know of corporate companies now that have in-house therapists, but at the same time, not all advice is created equal. And with this rise of, the mental health fad and, people seeking advice and diagnosing themselves. I'm ADHD, I'm neurodivergent. I don't even know what those words mean. I mean, I know what ADHD means. That one's been around for a long time. But you can't all be neurodivergent. And if you are, I think you should seek help, because a lady sitting in California telling you symptoms of neurodivergency is not help. I repeat, a lady sitting in, Birmingham, Alabama, cannot diagnose you and give you tips on how to survive. But at the same time, social media has created a community for people to kind of like have a space to belong, right? And so the fun fact of this week is that the global mental health industry is now worth over $400 billion. So essentially it's worth Elon Musk. That's Tesla, that's SpaceX, that's all those things that he does. He's not my favorite guy in the world, but he's the only person I think could have that amount of money. So essentially, we're kind of living in a world now where self-improvement has become a sort of a market, and, everything that's kind of sold to us is very much about healing and self-improvement and all that other stuff. But I think the debate is, when does it stop? You know, like I said, my therapist is slowly breaking up with me. And the reason for that is every time I walk into a session, we speak and I'm basically therapizing myself. I've got the solutions myself. And she's just like, so she doesn't say it, but I can see it on her face. And so there comes a point where, you know, you almost kind of have to move on from healing and start living with your life, you know, and start living your life. You know, there's only so much gym you can gym. There's only so much meditation you can meditate. There is peace in all of these things, but I do think there's a ceiling, and there comes a time where you kind of have to be okay with all the versions of yourselves, the ones that have healed and the ones that are coming. So yeah, I'm going to speak about myself and my journey. This is called Why Therapy Changed My Life. So I've been in therapy since I was 4 years old. My mother won't tell me why. She gives me a different reason every single time. I've just respected that and just, you know, been like, you know what, maybe there's some scary things happened and I don't need to know that. But I've been in therapy since I was a child, right? And throughout my life, I've had stints in and out of therapy. So 4 years old, I remember the office in Queenstown and playing with dolls and all that other stuff. And I remember I just used to go visit this lady and just play with dolls. And then fast forward to when I turned about 13, and I tried to take my own life. Lots of things were happening there, you know, just mommy issues, daddy issues. And I think, you know, our generation at some point got thrown into this rainbow nation, right? And we went into these schools that were predominantly white, and we were heavily policed, right? Our hair wasn't good enough. Our skin was too dark. There was all these things, these microaggressions. Like, you know, I always say on TikTok, like, when I'm describing someone who is bad, I say skibenga. That's because that's what our teachers used to call us. Don't walk around here acting like a skibenga. That's a microaggression.
You never give me. You never give me.
You know what I mean? And we walked into these schools where we were the change, the new freedom, the new South Africa. But we were very much discriminated against. We were very much not understood in these schools, and we were judged harshly for being Black. And so there's all these things that millennials grew up with. Like, I was watching school today, I was watching a TikTok today, and these kids are in the school hall and they're dancing and they're doing all the TikTok dances, and it's like, it's such a fun time. We couldn't even eat in school uniform outside the school premises. Thank you, Queenstown Girls High School, but you taught me how to be a lady. So yeah, I mean, you know, mental health does matter. Our pain is real. But for me, when I was in my teenage years, I felt a lot of pressure. I like I said, I had a lot of mommy issues. My mom worked really hard. I was also extremely embarrassed by my situation. You know, you go to these PTA meetings and all the white moms are there, and your mother is nowhere to be found because she's working. She's trying to make sure that you are in the school, but the trauma that causes is that you feel like you're unloved or you're unwanted, or, you know, your parents don't care about you, when the reality is that they are working their damn hardest to make sure you succeed in this white school, that you have, you know, the Carleen pencils, those who know, and the 24 set. Something's in my eye. So yeah, I tried to take my own life at the age of 13. I was then put in therapy again. And after that, I changed schools, you know. I wasn't really happy with my school. I moved to Hudson Park, and this is also me kind of rectifying a mistake I made in my first episode. I said that I went to Balmoral and JHS, which was true, but I also finished and matriculated at Hudson Park, and I would like to recognize Hudson Park High School as the school that made school fun again for me. And so, yeah, then I moseyed on along being a rebel but being a rebel and still being good at school. And I think that's one thing everybody else is missing out on. If you're going to be naughty, make sure your marks are good enough. So yeah, I went to therapy then, and it didn't last very long until we kind of just like moved on. And I then came to varsity, I came to Joburg, and everything seemed to be okay and fine, and I moved along with my life. But if you've watched my first episode, then you know that I then fell into extremely deep depression and deep anxiety. And once again, I went back to therapy, and that's the therapist that I've been with now for the last 5 years, and I'm obsessed with her. She's Black. I also do believe, do not take my advice on this because I'm not a therapist, but I do believe as Black people, your therapist needs to be Black. I'm sorry. You can't sit across someone and have to explain washing of the spades. And why you were bullied at home while you were washing spades a year later after your grandmother's died. I'm sorry. That's too much money that you're wasting on explaining just the basics of your identity, right? But for me, as I said, I've become very obsessed with self-improvement. And I think sometimes to my detriment, at times if I don't get my routine right, because I'm also OCD, if I don't get my routine right, or if things don't go the way that I want them to go, it kind of derails me. So it's almost like, how do I take these tools that have, helped me today and kind of constantly apply them to my life? So, therapy did save my life. I won't lie about that. But sometimes I do feel like we're taking it a little bit too far. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. At best, therapy isn't about fixing you. It's about reminding you that you were never broken to begin with, and that things have happened in your life, but those things don't necessarily define you. So now, where does it get complicated? Where does this episode go, right? So the reason I also saw this is because, or rather that I wanted to speak about this, is that I'll be on TikTok and somebody will be like, so the reason you feel such and such a way is because you're this and this and this. And I'm like, yes, that's definitely me. I definitely am neurodivergent. I'm all these things, right? And it got me thinking about how, this obsession with mental health and the therapy fad has kind of given people an opportunity to number one, exploit mental health issues for their own benefit, but also number two, how we've now made sadness, depression, anxiety, and all these things our identity. Now, I don't mean to say that, you aren't those things. 100%, I was one of them. I was the kind of person who, could switch off her phone and not be available for 5 days straight, have everybody panicking. I'm sorry to my friends. But have everybody panicking like, is Jaxx okay? Is she alive? They know my history, so she can, commit those. And so I understand when you kind of identify with sadness or identify with being depressed, but I just also want to remind people that it cannot be your identity and your existence, Sadness right now is almost, treated like a diagnosis that is attached to you, as opposed to like a human experience that everyone else experiences. And I found this example in the New York Times, right? And it basically ties into this idea of language, this idea that we're taking things that are in the medical field, that are, what is the words that I'm looking for? I'm trying to be sensitive as well. We're taking things that other people have truly experienced and we're dumbing them down because it's like not necessarily the cool thing to do, but it's kind of almost the new way we communicate, right? And so this article, the New York Times reported in 2023 that the overuse of diagnostic language online, for example, I'm triggered or this is my trauma, risks medicalizing everyday stress, right? So this article is about this lady and she's gone on a date. Then this article is framed around, dating and this terrible world that we live in. I know, I'm single. You don't want to be out here. Let me just take the time to say, if you are in a relationship and it's good, ibambis this one, hold it tight because yay, get better. So anyway, this lady essentially is going on all these dates, right? And she eventually finds the guy that she thinks like, oh, he might be the guy. They're chatting, they're getting along, and all of a sudden he ghosts her, right? And they had bonded on a variety of things, including trauma, right? And so this lady's name is Miss Scott. So I'm going to read you some pieces that I took from the article. Miss Scott vented about this on a phone call with her mother. This is after the guy ghosted her, who offered a diagnosis. The guy, she said, had love-bombed her daughter. Miss Scott laughed. I was like, how do you even know that word? She said. Her mother had heard the term, a description of narcissistic abuse, on radio. Dating comes with its own dictionary, a collection of buzzwords like breadcrumbing, zombieing, and of course, ghosting. But in recent years, psychology terms like love bombing, gaslighting, and trauma bonding have also wedged their way into the lexicon. Hinge, a popular dating app, and I just want to stop here and say that Hinge as a dating app, I know 2 success stories from Hinge, right? I'm not saying dating apps are bad. 2 of my friends are currently, one's married, one's about to get engaged. She's actually engaged. The cows have arrived at home from Hinge. So shout out to you guys. You guys know what you're doing, but could never be for me. But anyway, Hinge, a popular dating app, still lets users post sunglass-clad selfies and proclaim their love for espresso martinis. But now they can also respond to prompts like, therapy recently taught me, a boundary of mine is, and my therapist would say I. This terminology isn't unusual. Therapy-related words and phrases have trickled into workplaces, surfaced at schools, and galvanized people online. Dr. Jesse Gold, a psychiatrist at the Washington University in St. Louis and a member of the American Psychiatric Association's Council on Communication, isn't surprised that psychological language has trickled into everyday conversation. In some ways, it's always been the case that people are using the terms in ways that a clinician wouldn't, she said. Speaking about mental illness in general can help destigmatize conditions like anxiety and depression, she said, and good can come from being vulnerable with a new partner. There are, however, clear downsides to learning a therapy term via TikTok, video, or meme, namely that non-professionals can get it wrong. The term trauma bonded, in particular, is tossed around to signify connecting with someone over shared struggles. The clinical definition of the term refers to a specific pattern of abuse. A trauma bond is an emotional attachment between an abuser and an victim. So do you see where I'm going with this, essentially? You've got like this catch-22 where therapy has been so good in changing people's lives and removing trauma out of people's lives, but at the same time, the downside, as always, because social media, is that people are capitalizing and, almost removing the weight of these words and their meanings. And this is also not to say, there shouldn't be an evolution in language, as we've always found that language always evolves. It's just always, concerning, because what ends up happening is then therapy and, self-improvement become they're sold to us as like these endless projects that you constantly have to improve yourself, that you almost miss out on actually living your life. Example of this is the rise of therapy influencers who are selling e-courses and coaching programs with no formal clinic training, turning healing into a hustle. The Business Siders did an investigation into TikTok therapists and how they're monetizing mental health without any accountability. And so that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the concern for me is like, when do we know when to stop? When do these associations that are supposed to protect human beings step in to help people from falling into cults, for example, or, spending all their hard-earned money on self-improvement that's actually taking them nowhere? But I think more than anything, what I do want to stress is that you should be wary of, trying to use therapy as a way to describe yourself, and I've done this so many times. I cannot tell you. Like, I'm annoying at this stage of the game, but I'm healing. Catch me in 5 years. Hey, it's like this idea that like, I'm a very anxious person. How many times have I said this on this episode alone? Am I anxious, or do I sometimes have bouts of anxiety? Do you know what I mean? Or I'm a survivor, which I'm a little bit 2 ways about, because I feel like a survivor can also be a way of defining yourself as powerful once you've gone through something. Or even like, I'm healing. I'm healing. Those kinds of phrases and kind of identifying ourselves with those phrases kind of locks us into our trauma, right? So, for example, The Atlantic reported in 2023 that over-identification with therapy culture can actually stunt personal growth because people internalize trauma narratives rather than move through them. So yeah, that's kind of like why I wanted to speak about therapy. I also just wanted to kind of get an engagement of like, how do you guys feel about it? Do you feel like we're living in a world that is just way, way too obsessed with therapy? You know, I've told anyone with ears, go to therapy, because the things that happened or the things that I realized through therapy have helped me so much. You know, I'll use alcohol as an example. And am I wearing this shirt on purpose? Absolutely, I am. But because it's my friend's shirt, Warner Benzo, support your creative friends. No, but like, you know, for me, last year, when I quit my job, I had resolved that like, you can't be unemployed and be drinking. And those who know I used to throw down. It's not necessarily to say that like, you know, I had a drinking problem. I mean, there's alcohol in my house right now. I haven't touched it. But I would get lit. You know, my friends and I were big fans of tequila. I won't lie to you. Yeah. We used to go through tequila. But like, I remember, you know, going through the motions of therapy and being like, okay, cool, I'm healing. I've dealt with my mommy issues. I've dealt with my daddy issues. Why are things not getting better? And it was just like, okay, I do, you know, I put that down as well, because that was just obviously making me anxious. Like I would be great, have my J at the end of the day, and then be panicked, like, oh, what's gonna happen tomorrow? What's gonna happen with my life? And so, okay, I had to put that down. But the alcohol thing for me was I really started noticing that every time I would have a bender, and that's exactly what they were, benders, I would be depressed for 3 or 4 days, you know, and sad and not want to speak to people. And so it was kind of like a back and forth for a while. And I promise you, this is not to be like, you should stop drinking. You live your bad life as you want to live your baddest life. I'm not lecturing anyone here. I'm just telling my experience. But like, yeah, I would literally just be so down afterwards. And it just felt like, okay, something's got to give, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, let me try this here. And I think that's also what confuses people about my journey with no alcohol. I don't judge people who still drink. It's not a badge of honor that I wear. I think I also realized that every time I would post like 30 days, 60 days, it then started being annoying. So I even stopped doing that. But for example, when I was in London, because when you are on holiday, when in Rome, okay, when in the British Kingdom, when in Europe, whenever you leave this country, I've decided I'm going to enjoy a beveragino. Okay, so I landed in London. I was like, I'm on holiday. I had the most delicious risotto. I said it has to be accompanied by a glass of wine. So I drank, and then I remember some people being like, oh, but I thought you stopped drinking. Da, da, da. There's no goalposts. There's nothing I'm going to achieve here. This is a life choice that I've made that I don't want to drink. I'm building a platform. And on that note, like, share, subscribe, all those vibes. I'm building a platform. I'm building a business. I've left something of security, my job, my business that I built for 12 years. I need to have focus. And this one thing is holding me back because I can't keep going Sunday, hey, and then Monday is a write-off. It just didn't work for me. So that's also another thing that like I think people need to understand is that every person's journey is it's very unique. You cannot do what I'm doing. I can't do what someone else is doing. If you need to get home and have a glass of wine, you have that glass of wine, girl. But for me, it was very much like in my journey of self-improvement, there needed to be a change. And I had identified the things that were slowing me down and I had to get rid of them. But I'm also not in a prison. So when I want to have a margarita, I'm going to have a margarita. So stop judging me and be like, oh, I thought you quit drinking. I knew you would fall. Also, what kind of people are you? Why are you rooting for my downfall? Why are you rooting for my downfall? Okay. But yeah, like I've promised my friend for her wedding, I'll have a glass of champers. I will probably have to start drinking like 2 weeks before so that I'm not a mess because I'm a bridesmaid. Hold on, let's give me a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be a bridesmaid. I've been working hard in the gym because it's a backless dress. Do you understand? So yeah, what are we saying? What am I talking about? Yeah, when healing becomes branding and trauma becomes identity, we stop growing and start circling. And I think that's kind of like the message that I want to give you today, is to just say, you know, everybody has their own race, their own pace. Therapy is good, healing is good, but don't fall into the trap of capitalism where you think that you constantly have to reinvent yourself and constantly have to be the best version of yourself. Life is honestly lived with all the traumas, with all, you know, the unhappy days and the good days. This sounds very motivational. It's getting into that motivational point, isn't it? I'm so sorry. But yeah, like, guys, man, just live your life, but also don't traumatize other people with your own traumas because you haven't dealt with them. Do you see? I'm a very contradictory person. So yeah, you know, healing is supposed to open you up, you know, not trap you in kind of like this idea of self-analysis forever. You know, therapy for me gave me tools that I could live with. Like I said, I have a very strict routine. I'm a type A personality. I'm OCD. And that's also another thing. You're not OCD just because you're cleanly. I just like to say that. Obsessive compulsive disease is quite literally like you obsess over little things. There was a time in my life where I used to have to get my groceries and then unpack all of them and then put them in Ziplocs so that everything in my fridge looked exactly the same. Like if you look that side, and Rapson will show you a little bit of a sneak peek, all those books are color coordinated. There was a time everything in my life had to be color coordinated. But you see this chaos? This is therapy. This chaos, you can see hints of it because, I mean, they all yellow and go to black. But yeah, you know, it helped me. It helped me grow into this person that I am today, you know, a person who's very confident. Because I also think another thing that people never understood about me is that I'm very good at projecting confidence, but inside I'm dying. You know, I was very good at that for a very long time, of being the happiest girl in the world and then coming home and having so much doubt and just not understanding who I am and believing wholeheartedly in everyone's opinions of me. But now, you know, I live with boundaries in my life. If I don't want to do something, I don't want to do it. I was very much a ndihamba nomoya. If they say we're going here, I'm going. If they say smile, I'm smiling. I don't care a damn anymore. And that's the beauty of turning 30, by the way. It also taught me that the sad days are, you know, equally important. You know, I like to say, you know, one bad day does not make for a bad life. It taught me to live within my boundaries, you know, to laugh again, to enjoy life. And I think most importantly, to decide to be grand. One thing that they don't tell you is that you don't get out of it until you decide to be grand. Like you wake up every day and you choose to be grand. And it's hard and it's painful and it sucks. But you wake up and you're like, today's going to be a good day. And so, yeah, that's kind of, you know, my little schlep on therapy. It's this idea that, you know, I don't owe anyone an explanation for my life. It's not to say that you shouldn't be accountable, you know, but it's just like I kind of live life on my own terms now. I know who I am. I'm rooted in my values. Those values are values of family, of truth and honesty, of holding these politicians accountable through my TikToks. No, but like of just, yeah, of finally discovering who I am and being happy with who I am. And I don't necessarily have the most expensive things. That doesn't bother me anymore. I don't necessarily have, you know, the biggest house. I don't feel pressure either. You guys are suffering with your bonds. Those interest rates, they're killing me. They're killing you. Me, my geyser bursts. I say, hi, Peter, my geyser burst. I'm joking. Buy your house if you want to buy your house. But yeah, I no longer feel those pressures. I thought, oh my God, by 30, I have to do this and I have to do that. I don't care. And you also have to kind of think about it in this concept, you know, in this, the way it frames it. And I think a lot of people and creators talk about this, but like millennials have been through a lot, yo. Like we've lived through 3 recessions, 2 pandemics, no, 1 epidemic, AIDS, 1 pandemic, COVID, cost of living crises. It's a mess here. So I also want to just stress to people that like everything in its own time, very motivational once again, but everything takes time and, you know, it all starts with you and it also starts with discipline. Like I wake up at 5 every morning. I'm miserable, bro. But it's sometimes I wake up at 5, do my routine, and then go back to sleep. If I'm feeling tired, I'm tired. Like, why am I gonna force, this? I'm a 5 a.m.er. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents. I thought we'd make it personal. I've had a rough week, and I thought maybe let's just bring it home. We'll get back to politiki na party, but for now, let's just bring it back home, So yeah, every single week we have a fun segment, and this week's fun segment is called If Therapy Culture Was a Person. So if therapy culture was a person, it would say it's giving boundaries, but sends a 4-page WhatsApp at 2 a.m. Stop sending WhatsApps at 2 a.m. to men. Stop it. I said, stop it right now. They don't care a damn. You know who needs to be in therapy, actually? Men. Hey, yay. You guys are putting us through it because you haven't dealt with your issues. Go to therapy. My brother is currently studying to be a psychologist. My mom's finally going to get the doctor in her family, and because look at me. But I'm very excited for him because we need more Black men as therapists. I think that's also what Black men struggle with, is that relatability, because you're going to go speak to a woman. She's not necessarily going to understand your problems. She's not going to understand the problems men have. Did you see how much I struggled to say that? I don't believe you guys have problems. I'm joking. But yeah, let's get back into it. So if therapy culture was a person, she shares her therapist's words like their Beyonce lyrics. Of course she does. Where's the air horn? Because that's me. I be spitting to my friends. In therapy, you know what my therapist said to me? I'm annoying. If therapy culture was a person, they know every zodiac trauma chart but forgets people's birthdays. If therapy culture was a person, they host healing circles but still can't sit alone without a podcast playing. That's another thing that therapy taught me. Guys, I can sit in silence, hey? I can sit in silence. I can sit with myself. I'll give you this example. Now that we're getting older, we're kind of like understanding why our parents, and I don't even have kids, but why our parents would get home from work and just sit in the car and do nothing. I'm that girl. I don't even need my phone. I can just think and say, yo, what a day. But it's made me so comfortable with myself that I don't mind awkward silences. I don't mind sitting at home by myself. I be enjoying my rent. But anyway, if therapy culture was a person, they can name 6 types of attachment styles but hasn't texted their mom back. You need to deal with those mommy issues, don't you? What attachment style am I? Avoidant. Which one was it? Something avoidant. Detached avoidant. Hey. But I'm hyper independent. That's what we learned. That's what I learned. But anyway, and lastly, if therapy culture was a person, it says I'm doing the work but hasn't actually been to therapy since 2021. Get your ass back into that room and talk about your feelings so that you're not bothering other people. So yeah, guys, that's my episode. Laka, that's my episode. Just to recap, therapy is a tool, not your identity. Growth always. Hey. Growth should feel lighter, not heavier. There will be heavy moments. There was times I would walk out of there, puffy eyes. Then there was times out of there I would walk out skipping, like, oh, my future is so bright. But yeah, sometimes healing is just waking up and being okay with yourself, even without an explanation. So here's my question of the week. When did you realize it was time to stop diagnosing yourself and just start living? When did you decide to be grand? And has it been working out for you? Because just look at the material. Yeah, man, glow, no glow. I'm joking. That's beauty products. But yeah, interesting episode. Sir?
Cool. One question. What advice would you give to people who are in love with their trauma as fuel in order for them to be successful?
What advice would you give people who are addicted to their trauma and they use it as fuel? First of all, fuel. Let me finish the question. What advice would you give to people who are addicted to their trauma and use it as their fuel in their life? So they use it to fuel it. So you have trauma of, let's say you have trauma of never being broke, so you work yourself to the bone, you never really enjoy life. Or, first of all, I shouldn't be giving advice. If we've listened to this episode, I'm not a therapist. But I think, people have negative motivations and positive motivations. Like my brother will always say, he's mostly motivated by the negative, right? Bad things happening in his life, people doubting him. It's the Jordan, I took it personally kind of situation. But the other side of it for me, the other side for it for me is life should be happier. On the other side, you are constantly going to feel like you're not good enough, regardless of whether you're healed or not healed. It's not like you go to therapy and then like magically everything is okay, but working yourself to the bone, using your trauma, not wanting to deal with your trauma, for me personally, is a short-term way of living your life. And at some point, that trauma will catch up to you, then everything will explode. Right. So let me say Rapson, we've had this conversation before where you feel like one of your biggest fears is ending up back home. You've built everything. And let's say you do lose everything. Touch wood that doesn't happen. If you haven't dealt with your trauma, you won't be able to get back up. You will then find yourself in that position of, you know what, I tried, it didn't work out for me. Let me amount to nothing. What therapy and healing does for you, it's the ability to fall and get back up and have the tools to continuously do that, and understand that like bad things happen because this is what therapy teaches you. There's no utopia where like everything's just going to be grand all the time, but it gives you the skills and the tools to continuously get back because bad things will happen in life, just like bad things are happening in South Africa, So for me, you can be reinforced and pushed by negativity, but I think that's almost a sad way to live. It's a way where you live constantly anxious, constantly worrying about the next day, constantly like doubting your own self. And I just don't, personally for me, I don't think that's a good way to live. But that's just me, because I'm happy on this other side, It's for me, I can't even tell you how much this thing has helped me. I wouldn't have started a podcast last year, 2 years ago. It's been on my vision board for years because I know I can chat. But I wouldn't have started a podcast. I wouldn't have left the comfort of my company. I wouldn't have dared to do some of the things that I do now. And I sit confident that what I'm saying is true. And when I make mistakes, it doesn't crush me. I noticed in the video last week that I kept calling Africa a continent. That was the kind of thing that would spiral me into
country.
But that's what I kept saying. I kept saying Africa's a continent when it's a country. No, Ngosiam, you see. In last week's episodes, I kept saying Africa is a country when it's a continent. That's the kind of thing for me that would break me because I'm a perfectionist. I'm a type A, everything has to be perfect. Do we have another question? Are you good?
Do you want to go? Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay.
So, not to waste time, so you were saying that a lot of males need to go to therapy and talk about their feelings. But now the question is, do you think men are not going to therapy because they don't want to talk about their feelings or because they know what type of reaction they get either from a therapist, society, or their significant other?
So the question is, we were speaking about how men need to go to therapy. Do I think that men don't want to go to therapy because, what was the first one?
So basically, let's leave the therapist out of it.
Yeah.
So
because of societal pressure.
Societal pressure and how the significant other would actually respond to
how the significant other would actually respond to them. I think men don't go to therapy because men have historically been taught not to deal with their emotions. They have emotions because they're human beings. I think men have this idea that they must be stoic, they must be heads of households, that they don't have any issues. Just look at male friendships. Silly example. You are speaking to your boyfriend. He tells you, Johnny Walker and Paul Murray broke up. Ne? And you say, why? What happened? I don't know, babe. What do you mean you don't know? So your boy came, they're looking at me like, why would I know? What do you mean your boy came to tell you that he broke up with his hun and you guys didn't dig deep. How does he feel? He's just ended a 5-year relationship. He has no feelings about this. That's insane. So for me, I think men, it's ingrained in them to feel like they always have to hold it down, that, their emotions aren't valid, their feelings aren't valid, right? And that's not true because they're human beings. And if we look at our fathers, and I even think it even goes as a generational thing. Maybe our mothers are more accepting of therapy now, but our fathers still aren't. And then so that trickles down. So I think men don't go to therapy because men have not yet discovered that they have feelings and that those feelings impact all these other things, that they have traumas. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that they have traumas. You were beat up constantly in school and you believe that that was something you were supposed to take like a man. No, chief. You were bullied. People didn't like you. And it's sitting here. And now you're projecting it onto us. Bro. Kayothetha, kayoncokola, uzikhuphe zonke. I have some male friends who are in therapy and I've watched them changed. I've watched their lives improve whilst doing this. So it's you guys. It's this world that you live in where you think, don't get too emotional, or this is not a show of strength. I'm strong. That's why you niggas can't handle me. I'm strong. I'll go to therapy. Look at me. Come on. But yeah, I think that's why. But that's just my personal opinion. Because remember, I'm not a therapist. Thank you very much. So yeah, guys, please remind me to give these guys a mic because they keep asking very important questions and I'm honestly tired of repeating them, but I do appreciate the interaction. So yeah, that's the episode. That's me. What's that? 44 minutes. You asked for it. I'm giving it to you. They're getting longer. Guys don't know what you've started. But thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that every joke is a goat in the making, and you, my good friend, are a joke. Have a lack one. A joke? I'm the joke. Ndimuhaha. You're a joke. Thank you. Have a good night or a good day and a wonderful life.